Recording in progress.
Hello, hello. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. We're so grateful and fortunate to get to have a conversation with Chris Lynch, the author of Welcome to Neverbury. And this was a collection of short stories that at times made me feel like I was living in Hot Fuzz, and in other times made me feel like I was living in the biggest horror movie I've ever experienced. So it had such a big juxtaposition, but every single story felt interconnected and it felt so gripping. It was a phenomenal read, and really hats off to you for putting it all together how you did.
Thanks very much.
What I
But
really loved about it, and we had another author on previously, Mary McKenna, who done another series of short stories, so it's a good month for them. But I'd said it about her writing as well. I think that the speed at which you made me care about the characters, how distinct they were immediately, was just to not only do that, but to do that consistently in every story. I was looking at my notes before we started this call and just quickly reading them again. I was like, oh, I remember that guy. I remember what she was all about. I remember what their story was about from just like one or two like paragraphs of dialogue. So it was really, really wonderful. That's what hooked me in initially, and the rest of the stories kept up that really high level of quality, like really high quality short stories, quick, punchy, always with a little twist or a little twist of the knife at least at the end.
Yeah.
yeah, I was
See,
gonna
this is a terrifying. This is sort of terrifying at this stage because I'm in the middle ish of doing the second book, and so I keep having to go back to make sure I've got all the same consistency, but also trying to maintain that same voice is very weird now. So I do find myself sort of going, does this still sound like a Neverbury story? And it's really strange. I've got terrible second book syndrome, I think, at the moment. So I sort of it's
Yeah,
simultaneously lovely and also it just increases the terror whenever anybody talks about how much they liked it. And I'm always like, oh, that's so lovely. And then it just amps up that terror that what if I can't do it again? But hopefully I'll be okay. I don't know.
there was definitely a distinctive like Neverbury voice going through it as well, and I
Yeah.
don't know how much of that's just your style of writing because this is the only book I've read by you. I'll read other books in years to come, I'm sure. But there was a very distinct style to the writing. I always like to talk about efficiency and how evocative something is. I like books that say a lot without too many words, that kind
Yeah.
of pack a lot of meaning and action into a short space. And I think that was what really defined the voice. And Welcome to Neverbury never outstayed its welcome. It was always quite punchy, started in the action or just before it.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's yeah. Go
no,
on, go on.
sorry. I was just gonna say it's exactly that. It's the fact that it's a shorter novel in terms of what is it, like 175 pages, 180 pages.
Yeah, about
And
that.
within that, I believe there's 15 short stories, and each one, like
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
really does end with that packing a punch moment. And at the same time, like for a story to be 5 to 10 to 15 pages, like yeah, there are moments where you really feel connected to the characters, where you really feel like a lot's done. Like for me, the story that sticks with me months after I've read it is the radio story with the grandfather and the
Oh
dog.
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
Like
okay.
that one
Yeah.
kills me. Like that was just
Yeah.
brilliantly written. I mean, all of it was, but it's that ability to make the most out of such a small space, and I think that's an incredible feat.
Yeah. I think with all of it, I think it's a weird thing. The interesting thing about doing a book is you kind of not constrained by budget. So I've done a bit of filmmaking and that sort of thing. And you're always, when you're putting that sort of stuff together, you've got to be thinking about your budget and sort of like, oh, okay, if I want characters to go to more than one place, that instantly, more than doubles the cost of doing it. And then, oh, I want this to happen, and that's more cost, and that's more cost. So it can be really complex, and you can create an almost sort of unfilmable or undeliverable thing. So I think nearly all the stories are only ever in one. They're all in one place, so they're all obviously
Yeah.
all in the same town. But very rarely, I think, if ever, do characters move from one place to another. People might arrive, or they arrive in a place, but then everything happens in a very small confined space. And I think that's part of that kind of small town feel as well. It isn't sort of necessarily the stories don't get very sprawling because they all have to happen in one moment and in one space. in that time. And I think most of them have only got maybe sort of two characters that are really sort of intrinsic to it. They very rarely go beyond that. Obviously, the one with the radio, there are three kind of dominant characters in that one, but obviously two of them get a lot more time than the third one, who comes and goes.
Yeah,
That's been quite. It's quite interesting because different people who I talked about the book, if they've enjoyed it, all seem to pick different stories that have been like the one they really liked. So I suppose that's, I don't know, maybe it's just what resonates with them. Or if you've got a hidden fear of radios, Ryan, that you want some help with, or
as a young person, oof.
Yeah,
But as
attacked by a wireless or something, you know.
As you're saying, with everyone kind of having a favorite, did you have a favorite one to write or to read?
I think the second one, I particularly enjoyed doing the second one, because that's one of the only ones without dialogue. So most of them there's dialogue between the characters and different characters interacting. But the second story, The Dead Letter Office, is just one.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's seen from the perspective of the one character, of the postman. I had quite good fun kind of I like to hide little kind of pop culture references and things in the stories. I think that probably comes from before I started doing this book. I was doing kid stories, so it's quite fun, I think, to put things in for the parents. So I'm going to get sort of guessing around my age, so they're reading it through, and you can do that kind of thing. I think like Sesame Street, I always thought was really good at it, where it would have two jokes on it. It would say one joke for the adults and one joke for the kids, and you'd find yourself sometimes sort of chuckling along at something, and then the kids sort of looking, going, "That's not funny." You go, "No, it's not. It's not funny. That's not funny at all." So I had quite good fun hiding postman related kind of stuff in that. And I think when you live in the UK, the post office, the post office is not a laughing matter at the moment, but the general appalling state of postal service in the UK is also pretty bad as well. So so I think that was a favorite. That was also the first one, because I didn't sit down and set out to write a set of stories all in one place. I set out to write as many stories as I could in 1 month. That was the challenge that I'd sort of taken on. So I wrote the first one, and that needed to be in a location. So I sort of named the town and said, right, that's where it is. And then the second one, I had the idea for the story, but not a location. I thought, well, I can just put it in the same town, and that'll save me some time. So then by the third one, I sort of got this idea of, oh, well, okay, maybe these could start to join together. And then that was it. It really just took on a life of its own after that. So I think story number 2, The Dead Letter Office, that's the tipping point between it being, this is going to be kind of 15 stories. So this is actually going to be 15 stories all in the same place and that interlink with each other. And I think that's what's really been kind of, I suppose, a bit different about it, as opposed to sort of a lot of books of short stories. They're all in different places at different times. These are all essentially happening more or less sort of around the same time, and all very much in this one creepy little town.
So you've answered a question there that I was really wanting to ask you, which was, what came first, the stories or the setting? And I felt like as I read more into it, I got more and more of a sense of Neverbury being a place with rules to it. I think maybe around the time where, is it the girl who, it's not Zeus, but he looks like Zeus.
Yes,
the god comes, the paramedic girl.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, okay, right, I'm starting to see recurring things about the eating of dreams and stuff, and the gods above and the thing below. And I was like, right, like the more I read it, the more I'm getting a sense of this as being a place with a sense of consistent rules to it. And I wonder,
by then it definitely, by then it had definitely kind of formed in my mind what kind of place it was, and I knew there was a something, kind of a bigger underlying thing that was making the place how it was. So that one, which is bring the thunder, with the kind of rubbish thunder god in it, who's all been sort of forgotten, and then the sort of sky thing turns up, and so that's another kind of big shit. I suppose it ups tempo at that point a little bit, and it gets a bit more of a feel of there is it's not just odd spooky things happening in this town. It's got that kind of Sunnydale Hellmouthy vibe to it, that there is a bigger underlying thing going on. which I then try not to. I think he only turns up. I think there's another one with a tentacle, and then I try not to get too kind of squiddy or tentacly obsessed after that. Try and keep it under control.
You don't want to cross the hentai line.
Not really. No, no. Trying to say the right side of it. It's
We also have Rise of the Lamb.
definitely a line.
Oh yeah, we'll talk to Ollie about that one tomorrow.
Yeah,
but I really loved the that moment with the gods. You said it, that felt like it stepped up, because that moment for me was not like a title drop, because Neverbury's in every story almost, but like a cover drop where you see the moment that's on the cover in the book, and you go, oh, that's the bit from the cover. So I read that and I went, there's the tentacles. We've got some Lovecraftian stuff going on.
Yeah, and I think that's the first one that's the first story I think where it acknowledges that people in the town know the town is weird, that they know the town is strange. Up until then, they're all acting independently, but then this is the first one where you start to. I think that's the first time that gets the problematic location of it comes up, and the problems that the town has with things that you would normally expect towns to have, like police or an ambulance, a working ambulance, and that sort of stuff. That's when it starts to drift into being a little bit more kind of supernatural, I suppose, and a bit like, again, just a bit more joined up, in a sense of the place being a lot more wrong than you maybe thought it was up until that point.
Well, you
the football team especially. Sorry, on you go, Ryan.
I was just gonna say you also had the moment with like the house where you had the two people from away, and one of them was like kind of being drawn to this home. And then you saw not just the idea of the city being different and the people within the city knowing that the city's different, but also it having this allure and this power of its own, essentially, because it's expanded into bringing people into it. Like it's growing in a sense.
Yeah, and there are only a few times that happens. So there's that one where people come from outside the town to sort of in, and you actually see them in their life outside of the town. Obviously, there's one that's set in the Houses of Parliament that's linked back to the town, and then one towards the end, but that's set in an earlier time period. So it's definitely got its tentacles plugged out into lots of other things. I suppose because by then I was starting to think about how maybe I would want to do more of these stories after this initial collection was done. I started to think about, I can't have an endless stream of people who just happen to move to this town that's supposed to be really hard to find, or just turn up there by accident. There has to be a reason that people are coming, basically, or what should happen to it, by all logic, is it should end up as one of these kind of almost these sort of desolate towns where there's no industry, there's nothing going on, and the people who live there are trapped there and can't get out. Not in a spooky, mystical, supernaturally way, in a kind of a negative equity, they can't sell their house to anybody type way. So I needed a way of starting to bring people in from the outside to be a catalyst in stories. It couldn't constantly be this same bubble of people, really.
And then you've got more opportunity for consistent characters like Algernon, the Lord, like recurring through it, learning more about him.
Yeah.
So it's not just the place itself, but the people in it. Yeah, by the end of it, one of the main notes that I kept making was, I really wish this kept going into like a developed narrative or something, like a more conventional plot or something, following some of these characters, especially Helen as well.
Yes. So Helen's got a very obvious hook in for the next book, that her relationship with the town really changes. And there are lots of things that I know in my head about Neverbury that haven't yet been explored. So the house that draws the people in, I already know in my head whose house that is and why it's there. So I kind of know that, and I know there are a few characters who get mentioned, like Harold the historian just gets like a throwaway mention at one point, where Mabel, who's kind of impossibly old, says that there's this old guy, and it's like, who could possibly be, by Mabel's standards, considered old when she is sort of this impossibly ancient woman? So he turns up as one of the early stories now I'm working on for the second one, and he is a very he's a really interesting character in that. So yes, so that's what I'm working on at the moment. Really, is I've got to do Helen's story, and a lot of people have said that they really loved the short story sort of construction of Neverbury, but they would like a bigger story. So what I'm trying to do for the second one is have one big story, but just with asides where you go off and find things out about different characters.
Ooh,
So there's
okay.
a little sort of, I remember there's a James Herbert one, I think it's Sepulchre, where you've got the main story that goes on, and every now and then it just stops and says, right, we're going to go and tell you who this character is. And you get like a little novella in the book where you find something out about a character. So I think the difficulty, I suppose, something like that is obviously then the reader knows a lot more about the characters than maybe Helen does as she's going through it if she's the main character. So I'm still fiddling around with that. But yeah, Helen's definitely got a lifespan after the first book. Anyone who survives, basically, because a lot of people don't make it through the first book. But anyone who survives is fair game for the next one.
Yeah, I feel like the characters that survived are the ones who their potential hadn't already been spent in just one story. It wasn't so much a one and done. It's people that you'd want to see again anyway. So I think everyone that survived it, I'd like to see more of them, especially Algernon and Helen, the ones that we kind of get the most screen time with, so to speak.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember, and I apologize. Please remind me. There was the story with the eye doctor.
Oh yeah, okay. See, right, yeah.
What was his name?
I think that was my favorite.
Yeah, that's See You Right with I can't remember the doctor's name, but the optician's name. But the guy who comes in is Mudrick Scribner, because I decided I wanted to really like Dickensian sounding name.
Yeah. I thought he's got fingerless gloves on,
The whole thing was dark, and at the same time it was like I couldn't put it down. I want to know what happened, and the whole idea with like the ghosts and everything, it was just it was brilliant. And I'm excited, like you're saying, to see what ends up progressing and who ends up moving forward in that, because in, I would say, a more normal society, if something like that were to happen, there would be consequences.
Yeah.
But that's not the case in this environment. So I'm really curious to see what the long-term effects of that become.
Yes, it's also sort of, so that's one of the things with that one, because I think around then I didn't really know that I would definitely be doing a second one. So there are certain things that are set up about how ghosts work in that world now that I have to sort of carry on with. Because there were two different ones that sort of involve ghosts, which is See You Right, and then Design for Living, which is the one with the house, has got a different sort of take on that. But yeah, there's plenty of room to. But yeah, I mean that's probably more of a slow burn, that optician, for him to come back, because obviously there's also sort of the question of why he's haunted, which you can't really talk about too much without sort of giving it away. But yeah, what he's been up to and why he's there. But there is a slight aspect of, I suppose, Neverbury also being a place where people go to sort of hide and to sort of hide out, because you've got he turns up there when he's got quite a dark past, and then Magda, who's like sort of the Twiggy style supermodel who also owns the little local paper now.
Oh yeah,
it's been sort of hidden in Neverbury by the establishment. Yeah, so I do definitely think that some people outside of Neverbury do know about it and do know that there's something going on there, but probably only a very small number of people know about it.
It goes without saying that this is a spoilery kind of interview, because we're just talking about everything, obviously. But we probably should have said that earlier. But we'll put it
don't watch the interview if you haven't read the book.
Yeah, go read the book. It's a quick read. It's a great book.
Yeah, I've been trying to be so good to just talk about enough without giving away everything that happens.
Yeah,
to everybody.
But I really wanted to ask a little bit about the influences that go into your style of writing, particularly the style of comedy that you write, because I found a lot of Neverbury quite funny in a very, very deeply relatable citizen of the UK kind of way.
Yeah.
Like anyone who's ever dealt with the post office or the local government or watched how MPs do their job is that, like almost every aspect of it, just down to the descriptions. There was a mention of IKEA furniture in in one of the stories that was so on the nose.
Yes.
Like I think
Yeah.
everyone's had an IKEA experience. What was the one I wrote down a line that was just Roger was the kind of man for whom cardigans were invented. I thought,
Yes.
God, that's
Yeah.
so efficient. How it just completely cuts to the bone. I know exactly who this man is now.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about where that comes from. Like, what do you enjoy reading and consuming?
So there's a chunky element of that, which is actually, I think, from my dad, who is the master of nicknames and is very good at delivering nicknames onto people that completely encapsulate them. In
Perfect.
sort of sometimes in very sort of comedic ways. But I suppose some of it is, I mean, I absolutely love things like League of Gentlemen, Inside Number Nine. I think
Yes.
are brilliant, and they are inside number. A lot of people have said, "Oh, yeah, it feels very Inside Number 90," which I would sort of shamelessly say, "Yeah, it absolutely does." I think in many aspects, I
High
think that,
praise as well. High
um,
praise. That's a great show.
well, it is. I'm quite happy with that. And that's a great review. I'm quite happy to slap that onto everything. Because loads of people love that.
Yeah.
So, and again, I think that kind of small cast and compressed space thing is part of that. But I think, yeah, I mean, the sort of the funny aspects. I suppose the fact is, for me, I I get put into kind of the horror genre box, which is quite reasonable, because I think if you're not expecting scary things to happen, then I've probably sort of missold the book and what's going to happen in it.
Mhm.
But I think in our real lives, comedy exists right alongside horror all of the time.
Yeah.
Um, and I think don't if you don't acknowledge that, for me anyway, you would end up just with a very grim book, or just a very dark book. Which for me, if I read something like that, it just doesn't ring true. It just doesn't ring true that people wouldn't
Yeah.
say a weirdly inappropriate thing at that point in time, or wouldn't kind of just make a joke out of something, because that is, it's a very British thing, but it is what we do.
Yeah.
It is what we do. And I think that's very much a part of it. And I think just, yeah, the horror of kind of the mundane, and the things we accept. We accept terrible things sort of
Yep.
going on, and we just go, oh yeah, isn't that awful? Isn't that a terrible thing? And then we just sort of carry on. We just carry on anyway. And I think we've got quite an elastic capacity for awfulness and horror and terror. So the more, for me, when I'm talking about that stuff, it makes more sense. And I think it's a great shortcut in my head. So like, he's the kind of man for whom cardigans were invented. Everyone knows someone who wears a car and is a cardigan person.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of hate doing long descriptions of people. So I think it works
Same.
better for me to describe them in an emotional way, or in a comedic way. I'm trying to remember if this is in this book or not, but no, it's in the new one, where I describe someone as looking like someone's folded a pterodactyl into a suit. And it's that kind of, he's just that kind of shape of person, that you get. So I think
Have you ever
that's,
watched the Thick of It, the one with Malcolm
yes,
Tucker?
I love the thick of it. Yeah, I absolutely love the thick of
Yeah,
it.
the way I think they describe, who is it? It's Chris. What's his face? He's a comedian. I can't remember his name. The big tall
Chris
fella, but he says he
Addison. Yeah.
looks like a Quentin Blake illustration.
Yes. Yeah.
I was like, oh, there you go. That's everyone who's ever read
And that's
a
it. Yeah,
book
that
knows exactly
absolutely
what
just
that is.
sums them up. Yeah, so instantly sums them up.
Yeah.
I'm really bad at remembering things that are in the books, but yeah, I mean, there's another one from the new book, which is a bit unfair, really, but it's he was at death's door, but he was the type of person who'd hold it open for other people first. It sort of gives you an idea of.
It's exactly that though. Like, by saying that, you can really think of the type of person. Like, it's so much more descriptive than just saying, he's tall, brown hair. Like,
Yeah.
you get the actual sense of their personality and who they are, and it's quirky.
And I think
you stand out.
gives you room to just paint your own picture, and because most of the characters they're very normal. They're very normal people who just happen to have something sort of very weird going on. So it's much easier, I think, for me to just sort of paint them in those sort of emotional aggregates and some, make a little kind of nasty, snidey comment about them. Everyone kind of go, oh yeah, okay, I know what that sort of person would look like in their head. I think maybe, I don't know. I would love to say this is deliberate and a great bit of literary theory, but it isn't. It's just popped into my head. Maybe leaving that space is what helps people, make it feel like the town they grew up in, because you have to insert your own people in it. Then
you have to give people the opportunity to create that environment themselves. Like the frameworks that you've given. I had a quick, maybe not so much a quick question, but regarding, like you said, like this kind of falls into the horror / comedy, and based on, because you've done a lot within the industry, and I've seen you've written children's books, you've got screenplays. How difficult or easy, I guess, depending on how you view it, is it to jump from writing a horror novel to writing a children's novel?
As I tend to write scary children's novels, not that bad. Basically, you've got to knock the old swearing on the head, and you just have to not kill as many people. Basically, or if you're going to kill them, do it off camera. Have them turn to dust or something over there.
Oh yeah.
There's one in one of my kids' books. It's a character who literally talks someone else to death, just convinces him he doesn't exist, and he sort of unravels, which is apparently quite scary. I didn't think it was. But yeah, I don't. I really have a thing if I'm doing something for kids, I've really got an issue with the idea of kind of like writing down to children. I absolutely refuse to do it.
Yeah.
So you might have noticed I've got quite a sort of fetish for kind of archaic words and old-fashioned language, and I do exactly the same with the kids. There's a bit less swearing, and obviously you've got to make it relatable for them. So I tend to put in a lot of stuff, like quite a few of them are set at Christmas. There's a book of Christmas stories I did for kids. So there's lots of things in that where it's how the kids perceive the parents' behavior at Christmas. So it's silly things like there's an ongoing war between one of the characters' mums and the rest of the street about who's got the best Christmas lights. And this has been going on, and sort of this endless arms race, and the poor dad having to go up and down the ladder, putting progressively more lights on, because I think it's number 32 at the end of the road. That they hate them. They hate number 32 with sort of a natural level of passion. So I think it's very similar in a weird way. Neverbury was quite a nice sojourn after that, because I got to do the more scary things and a more adult tone. But it's not. I personally don't find it terribly different. But that's because I don't necessarily do kids' books in a kids' fashion. If that makes sense.
I think it's really nice. Like you're saying, you don't write down the kids, but at the same time, just making it relatable more than anything. I think a lot of times when I was growing up, and like you have that idea of like, oh, you need to reading gets pushed on you a lot of times when you're younger, and because of that, like for me, I'll be totally honest, I did not really read as a kid at all. It wasn't until I finished like high school and then subsequently uni where I was like, oh, I like books, because you can then choose the books that you want to read. You're not stuck within this mold of what you feel like you should be reading. And I think it's really nice that that's the direction you've taken with all that.
Yeah, I think it's just I've sort of found my kind of space where I'm comfortable, which is just outside of kind of reality. I don't think I would enjoy very much writing kind of real high fantasy or something like that, where as much as I enjoy reading that stuff, I don't think I could necessarily be very good at writing it, because there's no IKEA in Rivendell, is there? There's not. There's no corner shops. So corner shops in Mordor. So I can't sort of
I would really love to read that. Feels very Terry Pratchett to me. Like it's high fantasy, but it's about the post office being terrible. I think
that's it. I love Terry Pratchett. Yeah, I mean, I adore Terry Pratchett, and actually, I think that's another inspiration, really, in the way that he used a fantasy world to talk about things that are just the normal world for us. And as the books go on, as the books go on, there's the high energy wizards who are obviously supposed to be like CERN, and you've got all these different things going on. Particularly of the Night Watch ones, which are sort of the police procedurals of that world. They're set in a fantastical world, but it's increasingly close to our own. So, they bring in the banking and they have the clacks for sending messages and all these different things. So it's a similar idea to that, in that I want to talk about real things. So I could be try to be very arty about it and say, Dead Letter Office is about the frustration of this man, sort of fighting against progress. It is also about a guy who starts on the pretty traditional thing of he kills a small animal and decides he likes it. So there's that. You can take it on either level. And the same with when sort of See You Right. There's a lot in that about that sort of survivor's guilt, really, and what's going on in there. I suppose that helped, because a lot of these things, they say you should write what you know. I think that leads for quite dull books in a lot of instances to me. I don't know what it's like to be pursued by ghosts, but I can imagine that. And so grounding it makes it a bit easier for me to deal with then.
So I do apologize. I should have updated you guys. The timer's got about 80 seconds left. So time has flown by here, and I want to make sure that our audience gets a chance. If they liked Welcome to Neverbury, where's the best place that they can find you? What do you think of your story? Should they read next? When's the sequel coming out? No pressure.
All right. So in 60 seconds. So the best way to do it is just to go to my website, which is www.chrislynch.link. It's the most kind of, narcissistic website I could possibly have found. I bought it. So that's me. There's links on there to go and pick up Welcome to Neverbury, which you can get for your Kindle. You can get a paperback. You can get an audio book now as well, which I really love. The guy who did that does different voices for the characters. It's more like an audio play. It is really good.
Oh, that's really cool.
The next book I am hoping will be out before April. So that's my aim. I'm about halfway through now. So I need a bit of time after that to edit it and get it all put together. It depends how quickly my wife, Emily, who's my editor, will finish my proofreading for me. So there you go. For the world to hear. It all rests on Emily. It's nothing to do with me.
Bless. Well, thank you so much for being here. We both really, really appreciate it. And welcome to Neverbury. Chris Lynch, thank you again, and hope we get to speak soon.
Thanks very much, guys.